I didn't want to be a speaker. In fact, I don't like speaking so much at the beginning.
You
That
want
was
to be
what
a
made me do
writer.
it.
You didn't want to be a writer, and yet
I
you're
don't
writing
know. I do
phenomenal.
things because I want to see how hard they are and if I could master them, right? But I ended up liking speaking. I ended up liking writing to some extent, you know what I mean? And I ended up liking a lot of things. But to me, when they asked me to come speak about that, I'm like, well, nobody's going to want, maybe can really relate to mine because mine's really a different story. But what I was able to add to the um, experience, I think, was the kinds of things that worked and didn't work for me. And a lot of what led to a lot of my opportunities was because I have the nationally syndicated radio show, podcast, both use both. And that led to a lot of speaking opportunities. But my very first speaking engagement was before I had my radio show. I was the MBA program chair at the Forbes School of Business, and they told me, "You're speaking for Forbes about this subject
Whether
next
you
week."
like it or not.
Yeah, this is what you're doing, but you're getting paid for it. I'm like, so my very first speaking gig was paid. It was a good pay, and it was for Forbes, which is huge. But that's not most people's first gigs, right? So most people end up doing a lot of free speaking first. But for my very first gig, I had to talk about the future of the workplace. You can actually find this on YouTube. It's on my media page probably too. But I think you have to find my media page because it might be unlisted anymore. But it was, here's your topic. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'll just rely on my PowerPoint presentation because I could figure out where I am if I look at it, right? But I can't see anything with my contacts in up close. Okay, so I'm like, well, I'll look at the prompters, right? I get there, no prompters, nothing.
No prompters.
And bright light, so bright in my face that I couldn't see anything, basically. So the only way I could tell where I was would be to look at the slides, which were behind me, a giant screen behind me. So if you watch this presentation every once in a while, you could see me going, and then, and because I had no idea where I was, but I mean, it was so not what I wanted to do. And yet it was such a great thing to get me on this journey. Sometimes you just fall into these things. What was your very first speaking gig outside, not in a classroom, not, outside, up on a corporate type of stage? I'm curious.
Oh, it was a community thing in the community I was living in New York, and they asked me to speak, and everybody around me, I don't even know what the topic was. Everybody around me knew nothing about anything. I mean, they knew their particular things, but they didn't know anything about speaking. So I came prepared with an intro that the person who was introducing me could read. She was offended
Why?
because I had the temerity of giving
Oh,
her a script. This is my life.
nobody introduced me. They just go stand up there. We got cameras on.
Well, she did. She was offended, and I thought, well, this is lovely. So I looked like the pushy broad who knew what she was doing on television, but was not a speaker. But here's I was trying to facilitate her job, but
Mhm.
she was not happy about that. So I got up and I did my thing, and I wasn't paid a dime. But already my name was well known
Yeah.
on national television. So I mean, I wasn't a speaker. I had no interest in becoming a speaker. I didn't even know that was a profession.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you look back at some of these things and the things that happened. I mean, that was a thing I didn't count on. Another thing I didn't count on, as far as the lights and not being able to see and all that. But another thing, I spoke in front of a couple thousand people one time at an event, expecting to have a clock telling me what time it was.
Oh yes.
Yeah, and how much more many minutes you have left? Kind of nothing. You did, yeah. I'm going, well, I think I'm near, and it was the kind of thing that was at set up to the second, like you had to be done, you had to go on to the next thing. You couldn't, I ended so early because I was so worried that I would run over that it just was not good. You know what I mean? And there's just so many things you think that they're going to think about. I flew into Alabama, Birmingham for something, and my flight was stuck on the tarmac in Houston for hours. I get in like 2 a.m. I got to get up and speak. It's, by 6, I got to get up, and I maybe got 2 hours of sleep by the time I got there and got in, and then none of your slides may not be there, or things like, there's so many things that could go wrong. And I think that you have to just have a sense of humor. If you take it all so seriously, you're going to just make yourself miserable, right?
Oh my goodness, I could tell you so many stories where I really messed up. I didn't know there were time limits for this, and when I was first getting started, I didn't know that in X number of minutes they would say that's enough, and I saw somebody waving from the very, very, very. I didn't get that. Okay. I thought they were waving at me.
Yeah, hi.
Stupid. I have done some of the
Yeah.
most stupid things, but you really, sense of humor is imperative. Just laugh at yourself, just laugh at the gig, just laugh at everything that happened and say, next time I'll do better. But from these screw ups and from not really knowing anything about anything and being I was once thrown into a situation to do a satellite conference out of New York, but it went everywhere around the world. And Sally Jessy Raphael was hosting it. I had never met her before. Mm-hmm. Who knew that I would end up?
Yeah.
Who knew? Uh-huh. But anyway, so she was hosting it, and I was part of a number of different well-known women who were talking about whatever we were talking about. And in the green room, where so much of my ascension has occurred. And I tell you this because in the green room, you talk to other people, well-known people, people who know far more than you do. And I was such a neophyte. And in the green room, there was a guy sitting there who was there just to hear his girlfriend speak. I didn't know him. And he was it turned out he was a writer for Wall Street Journal. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was trying to remember which, okay, because he's no longer writing for them. Anyway, so he was writing for them, and everybody in that green room was an author. Everybody had a book. And he said, and he's making small talk with me, and he said, so what's the name of your book? And I looked at him and I said, I don't have a book. Mm-hmm. And I looked at all these books and I said, how does anybody write a whole book? How much does anybody say? Oh my God. I felt so horrible because everybody had that. And I only had videotapes because those were the things. And people were taking them out of the sleeves, buying them and taking them out of the sleeves. Could you sign my videotape? Oh, that's funny. This is where I was at. Do you know that week it was a Saturday satellite conference, and it was that weekend that I sat down and I wrote an outline or some such thing for a book I wanted to write. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know where I was going. When the book was published, I sent this guy at the Wall Street Journal a copy and told him he was responsible for this. Oh.
That's
His
nice.
name is John Fund. You may have seen him. He's a guru on all of these networks now. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure he didn't even remember the situation. I'm sure to this moment, he doesn't remember the situation, but he was very, very influential in my writing my book because I felt so insecure about my achievements in comparison to everybody else who had written a book.